My name is Zoe. I am the Tipsy Psychic. Happy Bipolar Awareness Day. Making this video is one of the scariest things I have ever had to do. I have never been able to truly open up to people about my bipolar disorder. So yes, I have bipolar disorder, and it is something that I've had my entire life. Most of my friends and a lot of my family has no idea that I have bipolar disorder. So talking about it today is actually a really big deal for me, and it's something that I've been very afraid to do, but I feel like we need to open up more and we need to be more honest about it if we're going to combat the stigma that surrounds bipolar disorder, because the stigma is there. So before I begin, I am not a mental health professional, and everything that I talk about is going to be through my own experience and my own knowledge about what it means to live with bipolar disorder. Throughout the video, I might use terms like being bipolar or I am bipolar when I refer to it about myself, but I think language does matter, and while that's how I refer to it, because I have grown up with it and it's something that I do deeply identify with, I mean, it's a part of me, I think that it's important for you guys to say living with bipolar disorder when addressing the issue, because it is a condition that we live with and it's not who we are. While some of us might feel like it's a strong part of who we are, this is just how I refer to it for myself. So you might hear me going back and forth when I talk about it. Also, when I first edited this video, I realized that there were a lot of things that I left out, and I wanted to make sure I added those in. So if I'm dressed differently certain times of the video, that's because I filmed again afterwards and added that in. So personally, I have been living with this mental illness for a really long time. I believe my first diagnosis was when I was 7 years old, but I probably was born with it. And to most people, I don't appear to be bipolar. For example, I'll tell someone I have bipolar disorder and they've said, "Oh, I had no idea. You don't act bipolar." So I get all sorts of reactions when I've told people about my bipolar. "Oh, that makes so much sense. Did you take your medicine today? You don't seem bipolar." I am so bipolar sometimes too. "Why did you tell me? You kept that from me. You sound pretty down today. Are you depressed? I thought you were taking your meds. You are so overreacting. Stop taking everything so personally. You're way too excited right now. You're psycho. I wish I could be manic so I could be more productive. You must be PMSing. Everyone has something. You always are making excuses. Calm down. Why can't you just be happy? Why can't you just have one good day? You need to talk to a therapist about this. You should just exercise and eat healthy. What's wrong with you? You need help. You're just a drama queen. It's not all about you. It's all in your mind. It's a mental thing. Cheer up. You should get off those pills. You'll get over it. Are you going to shave your head like Britney Spears? And not saying anything at all can be even worse. So those are different responses that you should probably never say to someone with bipolar disorder. Responding in the right way is really important if you want to support someone with bipolar disorder. I don't like being treated like I'm a ticking time bomb, or for people to see my eccentric personality as a mental illness. Because a lot of people see me and they're like, "Oh wow, no wonder you're crazy. No wonder you're weird. That makes sense. You're actually bipolar." And that feels really shitty. Mental illness is already so stigmatized, and bipolar disorder even more so. We are the crazy ones. There is a textbook definition for bipolar disorder that goes something like this: a disorder associated with episodes of mood swings ranging from depressive lows to manic highs. But the truth is, no bipolar disorder is the same. We do have highs and lows, but we experience it all very differently. So there are two main types of bipolar disorder. Bipolar 1, which is what I have, and bipolar 2, which isn't as severe as bipolar 1. But it's still very important, and I'm not trying to downplay it in any way. It's really important to distinguish between the two because most of us think about bipolar disorder as having extreme mood swings. And bipolar 1 will experience all the extremes with mania, hypomania, deep, dark depression, while bipolar 2 will experience hypomania and depression. I also want to mention that you can still be diagnosed with bipolar 1 or 2 and also experience rapid cycling. And I'm gonna get into that later on in the video and tell you more about that because I think it's really important. So mania is usually a very personal experience and it can look very differently from person to person, but it usually has some main symptoms, such as feeling really happy and overjoyed, talking very rapidly, feeling like you are super energetic, feeling like you are on top of the world, feeling like you have all these new ideas and plans. I know these all sound awesome and they certainly feel amazing, but there is a darker side to mania. Being easily distracted, being irritated and restless and agitated, sometimes having hallucinations, being delusional and not thinking logically, being really impulsive, poor judgment, not sleeping for days, not eating, impulsive, reckless activities like spending large amounts of money on things or cheating on your partner or rearranging all the furniture in your house, obsessing about things and signing on to things that you can't get out of, saying things to people that you can't ever take back, doing risky things, feeling invincible, like you can just walk on broken glass or even jump off a balcony and survive. We associate being suicidal with depression a lot, but what a lot of people don't know is that being manic can also lead to suicide. It is not sunshine and rainbows, and it is widely misunderstood. Alienating everyone around you, or just doing things that are really out of character. Hypersexuality. So those are some really common experiences for people who go through mania, bipolar 1. I've been managing my bipolar disorder for a really long time, so I haven't had any of these strong manic episodes for years and years. But in the past, I did have experiences like this, and I don't really open up about this with a lot of people. This was my childhood and high school. I remember my parents knocking on my door at midnight, and I had completely moved all the furniture around in my bedroom. I remember at one point I cut a hole, like a square, in all of my clothes, even the most expensive clothes, to make a quilt. But as an adult, I haven't had any of these manic episodes. So I don't want you to think like this is my Saturday afternoon is going out to bars and flashing people. No. Or I would go in a store and I would buy everything in an aisle and then have to return it all the next day. And being manic can feel like a high, like you're invincible. At times you just feel fucking awesome. You know, like you can do anything, you're on top of the world, but there's an out of control feeling to it. And sometimes it was like I was watching myself do these things and I had no ability to slow down and control it. And that was really terrifying. During a manic episode, I would watch all my friends and family have to struggle with what I was doing, with what I was going through, and I couldn't do anything about it. And eventually, yes, I came down from it, but there were repercussions to that. And it feels like, in a way, you have all this power, but you're powerless. Platuchki, next. Severe mania is not a joke. I've heard multiple people make comments like, I wish I were manic, or I felt so manic the other day, or I get manic sometimes. Stop right there. Mania is a really big deal. It's really serious, and I hate it when people throw that word around especially when they're not diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It's not about being wild or super productive or super happy. Being manic isn't happy. And yeah, I mean, if you're living with bipolar disorder, sometimes people like some of the feelings that they get when they're manic. But most of the time, it sucks. It's not great. Being manic can be really dangerous. It can mean suicide. It can mean hallucinations. It can mean psychosis. It is not something to be taken lightly. So mania usually has to do with bipolar disorder. However, I did read somewhere that you can be manic and not be bipolar, but it's extremely rare, and it's usually because of a medication. It's usually like a temporary thing. It is very unlikely that you've experienced mania if you're not experiencing bipolar, if you're not living with bipolar disorder. So just be careful with the language that you're using. And please educate yourself on it so you know what it is when you talk about it. Now the other side of the coin is depression. So you've got your highs and then you've got your lows. And depression is very low. Depression is much more common for people to experience. And luckily we're speaking up about it more and more, and it's becoming less stigmatized, and we're getting a better understanding of it. So the main symptoms of clinical depression are feeling sad and hopeless and upset most of the time, lacking energy, exhaustion, not being able to concentrate, forgetting to do things, feeling foggy, no longer being interested in doing the things you would do, feeling empty and worthless, feeling guilty and ashamed, feeling pessimistic, doubting yourself, having dark thoughts, hallucinations, being delusional, a lack of appetite, or sometimes an increase in appetite, not sleeping well or sleeping all the time, suicidal thoughts. So mine has manifested as not being able to get out of bed for days, just having to lie there. And I have been suicidal many times. Now, I don't do this, but some people cut themselves, or they really drink or turn to drugs. I also want to make sure you know that sadness is not the equivalent of depression. Yes, you can feel sad when you're depressed, but it's so much more than that. And so people throw around the term, I'm depressed, I feel depressed today, and they're not actually depressed most of the time. It's usually they're just sad. They're just having a shitty day. They're just feeling really down, really dark. But depression is very serious. Clinical depression is no joke. It is not the same as just feeling sad. Many of us experience mixed episodes. This means that we can experience mania and depression at the same time. Contrary to popular belief, it's not just highs and lows. Oftentimes you're feeling both at the same time, and it can be really confusing. Sometimes I can recognize when things are kind of going in one direction or the other, but at the same time, like often, I don't even know what's happening until it happens. So it really depends, it varies, and it's really confusing when you have both of them going on at the same time. My bipolar disorder has varied tremendously over the years. So as I said, I have bipolar 1, but I also experience rapid cycling. So what is rapid cycling? Rapid cycling is when a person experiences 4 or more episodes of mania, hypomania, depression in any 12-month period. And it can happen with any type of bipolar disorder. I actually experienced something called ultra rapid cycling because my mood can change much more frequently within a month. It can last hours or weeks. Apparently, half of individuals who are diagnosed with bipolar disorder actually experience rapid cycling at some point. And it's often temporary. It's important to recognize that there is no pattern. It's usually very unpredictable, especially when you're not treating it. And other times it would last like half a year. You know, I was diagnosed at a really young age. So what I experienced as a kid is very different from what I experienced as an adult. Because when you're a kid, you have a lot less control over your emotions, and you know, over time I definitely matured a lot and I was able to get a grasp on things a lot more. So in my life, I hardly ever experience these extremes anymore because I've been taking medication, I've been working on myself for a really long time in therapy, and just doing what I need to do to function, to be happy, to love myself, and just to be healthy. It doesn't mean I don't have these times where I feel so depressed and I can't get out of bed and I feel like everything's gloomy. It doesn't mean that I don't have panic attacks and I don't get irritable from time to time, or that I don't have like a really hyper day where I'm just really hardcore productive, but also like really talkative, and I can still like do stuff because usually it's like hypomania in that case. There are times when I splurge way too much, or I make really impulsive decisions and I don't want to think about it. I just do stuff and I take risks, and it definitely keeps life interesting. But I know that I'm not suicidal, and I know that I'm not like self-destructive, and I'm not, you know, having a psychotic episode or hallucinating or, you know, not sleeping for weeks. Like, bipolar disorder doesn't just go away, but there are ways that you can, you know, manage it so that you can still live your life. And it's never gonna be gone. It's never gonna be like super easy and perfect. You know, especially if you're like bipolar 1, where you have these like real extremes, like, but at this point in my life, I'm usually really aware when it's going on. It's harder for me to know when I'm hypomanic and when I am just normal. It's really hard for me to know the difference until like afterwards. So my point is, I can still function, I can still be grounded, I can still give people advice, but I just have my ups and downs from time to time, and it's something that I just have learned to live with. So let's talk about hypomania. So basically, in a nutshell, hypomania is a lesser version of mania. Unlike mania, a person who is hypomanic is usually someone who can control their life and still go about their life. They can still function in society, you can still work, you can still do stuff, you can still live. And I honestly don't mind hypomania most of the time. It's like having this constant energy and everything is like great. You have more self-esteem, you feel more confident, you basically feel like a total badass. You don't need to sleep a lot. You feel like you can speak your mind and express yourself and talk a lot. The downside is that you often interrupt people, or you feel like you speak over people a little bit, or maybe you say too much, you disclose too much, things that you probably weren't gonna say, but you say them anyway. Maybe you make it all about you. So when you are hanging out with a friend and you're hypomanic and you both don't really have much to say, you feel this need to keep talking because there's this restlessness. You have to fill the silence. Sometimes it's like you're going through a brain rush. You just have all these ideas and things going on. You can multitask and organize. You may be more impulsive and speak up when you normally wouldn't. You might buy too much or be more active, you might be more social, want to socialize more. You also might be more inclined to take risks. Hypomania is like being high on life, and many bipolar people love it. Unfortunately, it usually doesn't last as long as mania or depression, and that knowledge that it may not last forever can be disappointing. I am a huge advocate for psychiatric treatment and for therapy. I think it's really important to seek professional help, and that combination is really important for people with bipolar disorder. Obviously, everyone's different, everyone's on a different journey, but in my experience, that's what works. So even if you're hesitating on getting medication, I would at least go to your psychiatrist, get a psychiatrist if you don't have one, and at least ask them, should I be on medication? Like, get their opinion, because they're professionals. They actually deal with people who have bipolar disorder all the time, and it's really helpful to hear it from somebody else as opposed to like Googling how to cure my bipolar disorder naturally. I think there are a lot of different lifestyle changes you can make, but they're definitely not going to be a long-term answer for you, in my opinion. Bipolar disorder is a spectrum for most individuals living with it. There's the official criteria for it when you get diagnosed, but usually it's a spectrum. It's a mixed bag of stuff, of goodies. And by goodies, I mean other mental health conditions such as ADHD, personality disorders, substance abuse, anxiety, impulse control disorders. So everyone's treatment is really different and very personalized. For example, alongside my bipolar disorder, my mania, and my depression, I also experience a lot of difficulty concentrating, and I have to take ADHD medication. And I also deal with a lot of anxiety, and I get panic attacks, and I have PTSD. So there's a whole bunch of things you can get diagnosed with at the same time. And it's usually never just mania or depression. I mean, good for you if it's just mania or depression, but usually it's not like that. Usually you get diagnosed, like it comes with a bunch of stuff. You know, when you're manic, you can also be really irritable, you can be really anxious. So it combines. A major symptom for people living with bipolar disorder is that they want to stop taking their meds. This is really serious. But I do understand it. I personally have never had this problem. I'm not one of those people that wants to throw their medication down the drain. There's this fear that you won't feel things or it'll numb you. I can tell you this, if you are feeling like you are no longer creative or you're numb or you feel like a zombie, then these medications are not right for you. And it can take a while to find the right combination. And also as you grow older, like as a kid, the combination of meds I was on is very different from the one that I'm on now. For people who say that, you know, you don't need medication, you should just exercise, it doesn't work like that. While I think that taking care of your health is really important and it can definitely assist you in feeling better, you definitely need a treatment plan. So certain medications don't work for people with bipolar disorder. For example, drugs that can treat mania can cause you to down spiral, or drugs that treat depression will cause a manic episode. And so it's really difficult to find a balance. There is no cure to bipolar disorder. There isn't a magic pill that you can take and make it go away. It is something that you have to manage. You still live with ups and downs, but they're not as extreme. So for example, I haven't had an extreme manic episode in years and years and years. And I haven't been depressed to the point of suicide in years and years and years. But there's still days when I can't get out of bed and I have to lie to my friends and tell them that I'm sick. Or there are still days when I hear a song and it makes me feel irritated. I'm managing and I have been pretty stable, and I can argue that I'm a lot more stable than a lot of my friends. You know, I'm usually the one they go to for stability and advice. There are a lot of lifestyle changes you can make alongside taking medication and seeking professional help. Exercising, avoiding stress, getting enough you time, finding healthy coping mechanisms, looking for triggers and kind of knowing what's gonna set you off and what's gonna trigger you. I think having a routine is really, really helpful if you live with bipolar disorder. You just have to make sure it's not too rigid. I've made that mistake before where I've scheduled things so rigidly in my calendar, and it made it really hard for me to be flexible, because you do have to be lenient sometimes and you do have to take breaks. So I do think routine and being on a routine kind of helps, but you also have to just be like open to change. I don't want to leave out sleep. because sleep is super important, especially to people with bipolar disorder. It can really impact your moods, it can impact your mental health and your whole well-being. And for bipolar disorder, like, sleep really affects mania. Like, you'll find when you're manic, sometimes you don't sleep at all for a really long time. It can be days, it can be weeks, like you're not sleeping. Sometimes that happens when you're depressed too, or you sleep all the time. In my case, when I'm depressed, I just sleep a lot. I'm always tired, always foggy. So on the times when you're not experiencing some kind of manic episode that's causing you not to sleep, or, you know, affecting your sleep patterns, then you should really try to sleep. You should try to get a decent amount of sleep every night and try to work on that. Take naps if you have to, because I feel like that really impacts things a lot. Like, if I've gone a few nights without sleep, I can tell I'm starting to get really, like, jittery. I start to feel like maybe I'm gonna be hypomanic. It just depends, and sleep becomes really necessary. For people with bipolar disorder, often sleeping medication can backfire and cause more hyperactivity or more energy. And so I have found that I can't really take a lot that makes me go to sleep, because it just makes me really, like, more awake, if that makes any sense. So while it sucks to be going through all these mood swings and ups and downs and all the symptoms, what's even worse is the aftermath. I saw this question online the other day that someone posted in a forum about whether bipolar people felt remorse or guilt or shame. That is the most ridiculous question, because I think out of anyone, we experience some of the most shame. Just imagine after a manic episode having to deal with all the things that you might have said to your friends and family without thinking, without really being able to question it. Looking at your bank statements and seeing how much money you spent, picking up the pieces from things you broke, having to apologize constantly, dealing with the people you slept with or the friendships that you ruined, having to deal with the judgment, the criticism. What if you were working and you got a promotion because you were being so productive and so confident, and then you signed on to all these different things and committed to all these things, and you could do that then, but you come down from this hypomania and you realize, oh shit, how can I keep up with that? How can I keep up with all these commitments? What if you told your boss you were bipolar and he fired you? This has actually happened to me. I can't even tell an employer, because chances are they'll find a way to let me go. Maybe you sent a super long text message to a guy that you just started dating and you're like, shit, now I can't take it back, you know? What if you just don't know how to fix all the things you messed up? What if people think you're crazy? And then there's the fact that people expect consistency. They expect you to be the same person every single day. And this isn't a personality disorder, so you're not like a different person, but you act differently, right? You do, because you have different energy levels at different times. The thing is, I never know what I will be feeling. And yes, I can manage things a lot better now, but there's still ups and downs for me. And I'm a really great friend, and I've learned to set boundaries and not sign on to things when I don't know how I'm gonna be feeling. So I've had to learn to really accept this about myself. But people who have just been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, they don't know this yet, and they don't know how to manage this side of themselves. And it can be a lot to have to explain to friends and family, people who you've known your whole life, why suddenly you can't do something, or why you're no longer interested in something. And then maybe the next day you are. It's just how you are. I'm constantly dealing with my impulses and worried that I'm gonna say the wrong thing, worried that I said too much. yeah, you might think that I'm overthinking it, but if you've been in my shoes where you're doing all these things impulsively, you have to be really careful. In most relationships, it's kind of natural for someone to know how you're feeling, to be able to predict your next move a little. It's harder for me. It's hard for people who are dating me because they really just don't know. I'm really lucky to have Dustin because he holds so much space for that, and he makes me feel safe. Like, he makes me feel like I can be myself. And dating with bipolar is really hard. How do you tell someone about it? When do you tell them? The first date? A year from now? Do you ever tell them? Some people have felt betrayed, like I should have told them. But that's because it's supposed to be the crazy illness. On your first date, do you tell people that you have depression or anxiety? The problem is we don't treat bipolar disorder as a regular mental illness. When people ask me about the importance of mental illness, I try to compare it to physical illness. Do you tell someone about your diabetes when you first meet them? Diabetes is something pretty serious. If you don't get your insulin or your medication, you could die. You definitely need a doctor to monitor it, but you are not your diabetes. You live with your diabetes, but you're not your diabetes. It's not who you are. If someone demands to know your medical problems on the first date, then they are not the one. So many people don't take mental illnesses seriously because they see physical ailments as more important. For a long time, people associated me with the manic pixie dream girl trope. If you're dating someone who has bipolar disorder, it's really important to be supportive and educate yourself on what they're going through. You can go to your own support group if you want. I was very lucky to have parents that were allies. A lot of kids have a mental illness, but their parents don't know how to handle it, and they don't know how to get them the help they need. It's important to understand that we are not our disorder. So when we have mood swings or when we do things that are impulsive or we show poor judgment, that is not who we are as people. You know, that's not who we are. There is a sense of right and wrong. You know, if I punch you in the face when I'm bipolar, I still have to own up to that, right? Even if the reason was that I was in a manic episode, it doesn't excuse that behavior. It's never okay to be abusive or hurtful. It never is a pass. It's not a free pass for doing that. Does that make sense? So bipolar people know this. They aren't out to be mean or rude or awful. That is not who they are. And they suffer the consequences for their actions. So if they're managing their symptoms, managing their bipolar, you shouldn't have to worry about that stuff. It's just important to be more understanding and compassionate, but you should never be okay with anyone treating you like shit, okay? But a manic episode is a reason. It's also kind of a stereotype that bipolar people are mean or vindictive, and that is not true. So unfortunately, most of the world gets their information from pop culture and movies and TV shows where they only see the extremes of bipolar or it is glamorized somehow. And then there's the way that we label people with bipolar disorder. We label them as crazy, as manic, as unstable, without actually trying to understand what they're going through. As a kid, my peers would often use the word bipolar, sometimes as an insult, sometimes as a joke. And I think it's really important that we educate children at a really young age not to use that word. Like, we can say, hey, don't use that word. Like, don't say you're so bipolar or wow, that was so bipolar. Like, it's not an insult, and what it does is it reinforces the stigma. And for a kid like me who was in class not being able to open up about my bipolar disorder, hearing other kids talk about it like that made it feel like it was something to be ashamed of. It made me feel like I had to hide it. And it really reinforces the stigma when that happens. So if you have children, I encourage you to like tell them about that. Because if they have a friend who's going through this, chances are they could be traumatizing that friend and they don't even know it. And it's almost a form of bullying without realizing it, kind of. So just make sure that you are aware of this and you're not just like throwing around the term. You know, you see this a lot in movies too. That's another problem, is you see people throw around the term bipolar, like, oh my God, you're being so bipolar. And it's like, no, don't say that. One of the main reasons we don't speak up about having bipolar disorder is because it's like our voice was taken away from us. People already have an idea of what bipolar disorder is, and it's like really difficult to convince them otherwise because of the way it's portrayed in the media and pop culture and how uneducated everybody is. We also see how other people react to those who have bipolar disorder. For example, in the media, we see Kanye West and Kim Kardashian going at it, and we know that he has bipolar disorder, and we see how he's been received by the public. Or even Britney Spears' mental health breakdown, how that happened, and how everybody reacted to it. Another reason we don't talk about it very often is because bipolar disorder is not our identity, and it becomes our identity. It's so widely misunderstood that it becomes this huge part of who we are, and everything we do is associated with our bipolar disorder. It's not all of who I am, and it doesn't explain every single thing I do. And it's possible that I'm just this wild, wacky, wonderful human being who also lives with a mental illness. There's also a lot of shame around being bipolar. We associate it with a part of ourselves that we need to hide because of the stigma. And it's really, really difficult to open up and feel comfortable talking about it because there is so much shame surrounding it. And the other thing is, we are all different. So everybody has a different story, everybody has a different experience, and not everyone is comfortable opening up about it and talking about it. And that's their prerogative. You know, I always say focus on the good, don't focus on the bad. The younger you are when you start taking medication, the easier it will be to manage your bipolar disorder as time goes on. And there's also hypomania. It's like our own little high that no one else can experience but someone with bipolar disorder. So many famous people have bipolar disorder. So many people are successful, living happy lives to the best of their ability, and they have it. They've been diagnosed with it. So you can too. For example, Winston Churchill, Demi Lovato is really outspoken about it, Mariah Carey, Beethoven, Virginia Woolf, Marilyn Monroe, Frank Sinatra, Carrie Fisher, Mel Gibson, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and I will always hold Robbie Williams in my heart, and Vincent van Gogh. Like, he speaks to my soul, his work. Ugh, even Ernest Hemingway. People with bipolar disorder are more creative much of the time and have really original ideas. When things are good, they are good. Studies have shown that bipolar people are linked to the moon. No joke. You can be super productive and take on the world at times. If you're struggling with bipolar disorder right now, or your loved one has bipolar disorder, just know there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Remember, it's a journey, not a destination. And it's really important to educate yourself and to open up and to connect. And, you know, don't give up. You are okay. You're going to be okay. And you're not alone. I hope this was enlightening for you. Thank you so much for watching. If you have bipolar disorder, please comment below. I will also post some more information for you to check out in the description box and some helplines if you are feeling like you're not in a safe place, or you're unstable, or you need help, or you need someone to talk to. I've also included a link to online therapy. I am not sponsored by this at all in this video, but therapy can be beneficial for anyone, so definitely check it out if you need someone to talk to. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.